F-117 be capable of delivering up to 5,000 pounds of munitions. The YF-117A's swept wings were much broader than the original Half Blue, so that an internal bomb bay could be incorporated into the plane's design. Here, munitions are hung below the plane and then retracted into the bomb bay. Externally hung bombs would have ruined the plane's low radar cross-section. The prototype was transported from Burbank aboard a C-5A transport to Lockheed's secret test facility. There, the plane was reassembled by Skunk Works engineers. This plane was painted in a desert camouflage scheme, ostensibly to disguise its facets during the daytime flight testing. The Air Force requested that all future planes be painted black for its intended role as a night fighter. Test pilot Hal Farley flew the YF-117A for the first time on June 18, 1981. He reported that the plane flew very well and was surprisingly stable in flight, despite its unusual shape. Future test flights over a Special Air Force radar range would also prove that the plane was as stealthy as the Skunk Works had promised. The Air Force accelerated plans to create a stealth tactical fighter wing and gave Lockheed an order for 29 planes. The stealth jet would be designated as the F-117 Nighthawk. Ben Rich's determination to get the Skunk Works into the Harvey competition had paid off. Eventually, Lockheed would produce 59 F-117s at a cost of $42.6 million per plane. In order to make the F-117 as stealthy as their original Hopeless Diamond, the Skunk Works now had to solve a number of very complex problems.
One of the hardest challenges was the fact that we wanted this airplane to look just like the Hopeless Diamond. We wanted perfectly flat, angled surfaces to appear to the radar. But to fly it, we had to take in air, we had to exhaust air, we had to have lights on the wingtips, we had to have a canopy for the pilot, we had to have an aperture for the infrared system to see through. So we ended up creating solutions, very innovative solutions to all of those challenges.
The rotating turbine blades in a jet engine are one of the most easily detected surfaces by radar. To solve this problem, the engines were set deep within the plane and the intakes were covered with a fine metal mesh that was not penetrable by radar. Since straight lines or seams on a plane can easily reflect radar, every opening on the plane, such as the pilot's canopy and the landing gear doors, featured a sawtooth edge that reflected radar away from the source. One of the most difficult problems to solve was how to deal with the superhot exhaust gas exiting each of the two jet engines. Engine heat could trigger infrared detection by an adversary. In a brilliant innovation, the Skunk Works created the platypus tail.
What the platypus does is shield the exhaust system of the airplane, which is very flat and very wide. All of the air that comes out of the engine is hot and washes over the platypus exhaust, which is basically constructed of high-temperature ceramic brick. And that brick is almost identical to the Space Shuttle tiles.
The ceramic bricks were designed to absorb engine heat. The F-117 engines also did not have afterburners, which typically raise engine temperature by about 30%. This limited the Black Jet's top speed to about 650 miles per hour. But breaking the sound barrier and calling attention to himself was the last thing a pilot would want to do. The F-117 would also carry no guns or air-to-air missiles into combat. The F-117 would depend on stealth for survival, not speed or weapons. And finally, everything had to be covered with RAM, or radar-absorbing material, a substance loaded with composite materials and iron ferrites that absorbs radar energy. The F-117 was as stealthy as the Hopeless Diamond, and the Air Force was impressed. In October of 1979, the Air Force formed the 4,450th Tactical Fighter Wing near Tonopah, a remote little town in the Nevada desert. The U.S. Air Force gave Colonel Bob Jackson the task of putting together the elite group that would make the F-117s operational. He sought out the best pilots in the Air Force. Brigadier General Dennis Larson is now the commanding officer of the 49th Fighter Wing based at Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico, the current home of all 3 stealth fighter squadrons. His association with the Black Jets has come full circle. Back in 1980, he was a young captain when he was recruited for the secret program. His first interview with Colonel Jackson was similar to that of nearly every pilot in the initial cadre.
When I walked in the door, he said, "I want to hire you for a job. All I can tell you is that it's a great job. I can't tell you where you're going to live, except for it's going to be in the desert. I can't tell you whether you're going to be flying, and that's all I can tell you. Are you interested?" And I waited about 2 seconds, I think, or something like that, and says, "I'll take the job."
When pilots first arrived up at Tonopah, they were introduced to the Black Jets in a scene right out of a Hollywood movie.
Normally we tried to show the pilots the airplane in the dark at night with the hangar doors just partially open, big American flag over the top of the airplane hanging from the top of the hangar.
For the first 6 years up at Tonopah, pilots were forced to sleep during the day and fly at night for security reasons. Pilots soon learned that if they did not get to bed before sunrise, they would have great difficulty sleeping at all. After the last mission of the night, pilots would race back to their special light-proof sleeping quarters, prompting one to say Tonopah was like a vampire convention. Living in this black world wasn't easy, but it had its advantages too.
We were able to get the program and the aircraft operationally ready in a very short time. 1978, the program decision was made to build the airplane. 81, it was flying, and 83, we already had met our operational readiness commitment, which is unique. I don't think there's any aircraft that's ever done that, except for maybe during World War II, we built some that fast.
Being in the black also had its disadvantages. Personnel involved in the project were forbidden to say anything about the F-117, not even to their wives or loved ones. On October 15, 1982, Major Larson became the 5th Air Force pilot or bandit to fly the F-117. For this achievement, he was given a plaque which bears the cryptic message, "In appreciation for your outstanding accomplishments toward achieving a significant event of national importance." It was not until the stealth program came out of the black 6 years later that he could tell his family why he had received the award. By 1989, the tremendous potential of the F-117 and stealth technology was apparent, but it was still an unproven entity in combat. August 2nd, 1990 would change everything. That was the day that Iraq invaded its tiny oil-rich neighbor, Kuwait. Shortly after, the Pentagon ordered the F-117s to the Persian Gulf, where they wrote an almost unbelievable chapter in the story of air power. The F-117 was the first operational aircraft to exploit stealth technology, while the B-2 bomber represents the next step in stealth. Though nearly every important detail about the B-2 is still top secret, certain information and footage has been declassified, making it now possible to tell the story of the most incredible aircraft that has ever been built. In order to fly and accomplish its mission, the B-2 requires the input of 136 individual onboard computers. Modern marvels will continue. The B-2 Advanced Technology Bomber is 4 times bigger than the F-117 and represents the next generation in stealth technology. Though the actual radar cross-section of the B-2 is a closely guarded secret, it is rumored to be about the size of a honeybee. Thrilled with the results of its stealth fighter, the Air Force launched a competition in 1981 to create an advanced strategic penetrating aircraft, a plane that could fly long distances, carrying a large payload, and invade an enemy's air defense system. To the aircraft industry, this could only mean one thing. The Air Force wanted a stealth bomber. In a replay of the competition to build the first stealth aircraft, the Pentagon selected Lockheed and Northrop as the finalists. But this time, the Pentagon selected the design submitted by Northrop's Advanced Systems Division. Northrop would build the world's first stealth bomber in a program as black or as secret as the stealth fighter. The public would not see the B-2 until November 22, 1988, only 12 days after they first saw the F-117, but 7 years after the start of production on the B-2. Ostensibly, the unveiling of both planes was to show the country what they were getting for their investment. Once again, Russian physicist Peter Ufimstev's formulas for computing the scatter of electromagnetic energy over a surface were the key to designing a stealth aircraft. But now, in the early 1980s, advancements in computers made it possible to project the results of Ufimstev's computations over curved or rounded surfaces. The stealth bomber would not have to be covered with simple flat surfaces like the F-117. This was important since aerodynamic considerations such as lift and low drag were vital for the creation of a long-range aircraft required to carry 40,000 pounds of ordnance, 6,000 nautical miles. Despite working in secret, both the Skunk Works and Northrop based their design for a stealth bomber on a large flying wing, an aerodynamic concept pioneered 30 years earlier by the legendary founder of Northrop, Jack Northrop. In late 1947, Northrop unveiled his innovative giant four-engine bomber, the B-35. A few years later, Northrop replaced the prop engines on the B-35 with more powerful jet engines, creating the YB-49. Jack Northrop believed that the aerodynamic lifting qualities of a giant wing made this the most efficient shape for a long-range strategic bomber. Unfortunately, the control systems of that era had trouble making the flying wing a stable bombing platform, and Washington lost interest in the concept. In 1981, Northrop determined that based on the B-2 mission requirement of carrying a heavy payload a long distance, the ideal width for the B-2 was 172 feet. Shortly thereafter, Northrop engineers discovered that the width of Jack Northrop's original flying wing was 172 feet. Though the B-2 shape was a critical factor to its low observability or stealthiness, it was not the only factor in creating a stealthy aircraft.
Many times people often feel that stealth is brought about purely from the radar cross-section on the platform, but it is not radar cross-section alone. There are many elements of stealth, how much noise, the emissions coming out of the system, the infrared signature, the visual, the acoustics, combined with the radar cross-section, all are factors that have to be dealt with, and in a balanced manner.
Hundreds of design problems like these had to be solved before the B-2 could be built, and many of the solutions required completely new manufacturing techniques. One of the remarkable innovations on the B-2 was the extensive use of carbon fiber epoxy composites throughout the plane. The outboard section of the aircraft included a 65-foot section entirely made of composites. In fact, the B-2 has more pure carbon fiber material throughout it than metal. In addition to making the plane more fuel efficient, the carbon fiber epoxy composites help absorb radar rather than reflect it. But the survivability of the B-2 in combat is not solely based on how the plane is shaped and built.
Stealth does not make the airplane invisible. The airplane is still visible, and what really makes the airplane survivable is the tactics used to employ it. Tactics are a very large part of this airplane, a very complex part. The mission planning, the actual on-board ability to plan a mission during the mission itself, if need be, all play a vital role.
Though there are critics who question the need for such an expensive weapon system in this post-Cold War era, there is no denying that the B-2 provides a tremendous nuclear and conventional deterrent.
If you can go anywhere in the world on a few hours' notice and drop a weapon within a 20-foot circle in almost any kind of weather with stealthy tactics and capabilities of the airplane, it offers a capability that someone must consider when they do something that's against the best interest of the United States or aggressive to a country that is one of our allies.
One thing is certain, stealth technology represents one of the greatest technological developments of the century. It's a pretty good bet that most of the warplanes of the future will utilize some form of stealth technology. Lockheed Martin's next-generation air superiority fighter, the F-22, has very stealthy features, and their top-secret Dark Star, a high-altitude pilotless surveillance platform, is thought to be as stealthy as the F-117. And don't forget that we didn't see the F-117 until about 10 years after it first flew. Who knows what type of amazing stealth aircraft may already be out there?
I think it's important that research and development, places like the Skunk Works, continue to reach out, continue to take risk, and sometimes fail. And I think the real issue today is we have become such a risk-averse society. Failure is just not accepted, that by virtue of not taking those risks, we are not going to discover the next technologies that need to be discovered to truly make our force affordable and invincible.
Today, the Black Jets are based at Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico. Here, young men don their pressure suits as if they were jet-age cowboys putting on their chaps before going out on the range. But these pilots ride the range in the Black Jets of the 49th Fighter Wing. If there is a lesson to be learned from history, military superiority will belong to those nations who create and master the next great technology.
Where's the best place to find anything about history? HistoryChannel.com. Any topic, anytime, where the past comes alive, online.
Now you can own this program on home video for only $24.95. To order, call 1-800-7